Helen Monroe sat quietly by the window in her small but cozy condo, sipping her lukewarm tea. The afternoon sun cast gentle lines across her framed wedding photo on the shelf, a moment frozen in time. Her late husband, Jack, had passed nearly a decade ago, but his calm voice and warm presence still echoed in this room. She didn't need much to feel content. She had her plants, her books, and the occasional sound of children playing outside her window to keep her grounded. But today her phone buzzed, and the name on the screen wasn't one she expected. Blake, her only son. They spoke, yes, but rarely for more than a few minutes. He was always too busy with work, or running after the kids. And Helen understood. She never wanted to bother him. She had learned over the years that silence was easier than rejection. Still, she picked up. "Hey, Mom," Blake said, his voice awkward. "So, Tessa and I are planning a family cruise in 2 months. Thought you might want to come with." Helen blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. A cruise? She had never once been invited on a vacation with them. Birthdays, yes. Occasionally Thanksgiving. But not something like this. She hesitated. "Oh, Blake, that's very kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," he cut in, though it sounded rehearsed. "We just figured you might like one last big trip with the family, you know? One last big trip." The words landed like an invisible slap. Was that how they saw her? As someone fading? Someone on her lasts? Still, she smiled gently. "I'd love that." "Great," he said quickly. "Tessa will text you the info." Click. No warmth. No follow-up. Just logistics. Later that evening, Tessa did text her. It was short and blunt. "Leaving February 15th. Royal Azure Cruise. Pack light. We have a group suite. Don't worry. We'll make sure you don't get lost on the ship." Smiling face with smiling eyes. "No, we're excited to have you." No warmth. Just another reminder of where she stood, a tag-along. Helen stared at the screen for a moment, then at her husband's photo. "You wouldn't believe how far we've drifted, Jack," she whispered. The days that followed were a mixture of hesitation and reflection. Helen wondered if she'd be out of place. Would they ignore her the whole time? Would the kids even talk to her? She knew how Tessa operated. Every kind act was a credit. Every favor a transaction. If Helen came along, it wouldn't be because they wanted her there. It would be to tick off a box. "We took her." She can't say we don't care. But despite her doubts, she went to her closet and pulled out an old suitcase. It still had the tag from her trip to Spain 17 years ago. Back when Jack was alive. Back when traveling was filled with excitement, not hesitation. The week before the cruise, something unexpected happened. A call came from a gallery downtown, about a guitar. Jack's 1962 Gretsch Country Gentleman. A rare vintage piece. One of his treasures. Helen had kept it untouched, in a temperature-controlled case in the closet. The gallery had seen the online listing she'd quietly posted months ago, and a buyer had offered $37,000. Helen froze. That guitar held memories. But she also knew. Jack would have wanted her to use it, not hoard it. She took a deep breath and sold it. And just like that, she had more money in her account than she had seen in decades. She didn't tell anyone. Not Blake. Not Tessa. Especially not Tessa. Instead, she quietly logged into the Royal Azure Cruise website and searched for her reservation. As expected, it was under Blake Monroe. And her room? A basic interior cabin. No window. The cheapest tier. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just made a few changes. She called the cruise line and explained that she'd like to upgrade all 5 rooms under the Monroe family name to Ocean View Suites, prepaid for all excursions, and even added private dining options. She paid for everything. When the operator asked if she wanted her name added as the sponsor, Helen smiled and said, "No, let's keep it anonymous. It's a gift." The day of the cruise finally arrived. Helen showed up at the dock in a soft blue blouse and a pearl necklace Jack had gifted her. Blake greeted her with a rushed hug. "Tessa," a smile too tight to be sincere. "Well, you made it," Tessa said. "Did you need help checking in? Those cruise lines can be so complicated." Helen smiled sweetly. "I figured it out, thank you." As they boarded, Tessa looked confused as the attendant handed her a sleek gold-tiered wristband. "Ma'am, this gives you access to priority lounges, private events, and all your excursions are covered," the attendant said. Tessa turned to Blake, whispering, "Did you upgrade us? I thought we picked the basic plan." Blake looked equally confused. Helen walked past them, giving them no clue. Dinner that evening was held on the top deck, the sun dipping into the sea. Everything looked picture perfect. Tessa wore a white sundress and sipped her wine. Her 2 children played nearby, and Blake scrolled his phone absent-mindedly. Helen sat quietly, watching them all. She felt like a shadow in a world she used to be a part of. And then the moment came. Tessa leaned across the table, smiled just wide enough to show her perfect teeth, and said with syrupy cruelty, "Hope you're enjoying this, Helen. Because it's the last time we bring you along." Silence. Even Blake didn't defend her. Helen stared down at her untouched salad. Then, without a word, she set her fork down, stood up, and walked away. She made her way straight to the front desk, then to the captain's quarters. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the concierge asked kindly. "Yes," Helen said calmly. "I need to speak to Captain Rowan Kent. Tell him Helen Monroe is requesting 5 minutes of his time, and that I'm the one who paid for the Monroe bookings." The chapter ends with Helen being escorted into a private office aboard the ship. She walks in, calm but sharp. Captain Kent looks up, surprised. "Mrs. Monroe, what can I do for you?" Helen gently sets her purse down and opens her phone to show him the receipt history, booking confirmations, and payment details. "I'd like to make a few adjustments," she says softly. No scene. No confrontation. Just make sure tomorrow is different. The camera would fade out as the captain nods slowly, recognizing her authority, not just as a passenger, but as the silent backbone behind her ungrateful family's comfort. Morning sunlight spilled over the horizon as the luxury cruise ship gently cut through the ocean waves. Seagulls circled above the deck, and soft music played from speakers around the pool. Passengers stepped out of their cabins in slippers and robes, excited for the buffet, poolside yoga, or guided island excursions. But in cabin 1124, something felt off. Tessa Monroe blinked awake and stretched, yawning. The room was colder than usual. She reached for her water bottle on the nightstand, but knocked it off by accident. It rolled under the bed. "Ugh," she mumbled, annoyed. "Blake, get that, will you?" Her husband stirred beside her, half awake. Later, Tessa sat up and grabbed her cruise card from the bedside shelf. She was planning to get dressed early and grab her seat by the upper deck pool before the tourists from Deck 6 got there. She wrapped a towel around herself and headed for the door. But when she tried to swipe her card, nothing happened. No green light. No click. No unlock. She tried again. And again. Still nothing. Confused, she frowned and called out, "Blake, my card isn't working. Can you check yours?" He rolled out of bed, annoyed, and tried his card on the inside of the door. Still nothing. Now both of them were frowning. "Okay, weird," Tessa muttered. Thinking it was a system error, she picked up the cabin phone and dialed guest services. The call rang, and then clicked over to a recorded message saying the line was temporarily disconnected. "Seriously?" she snapped. "Why would the line be down?" Blake shrugged. "Let's just go down to the concierge desk. In our pajamas? You brought 10 swimsuits. Just throw something on." Down the hallway, they finally ran into a passing steward. Tessa waved him down impatiently. "Hi, yes, we're in 1124 and our keycards aren't working. Could you open the door?" The steward looked at her badge, checked the handheld device on his waist, and blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no active guest listing for that room under your names anymore." Tessa's mouth fell open. "Excuse me? Your profile appears to have been removed from the guest manifest as of 5:45 this morning." "What does that mean?" Blake asked, stepping forward. The steward scratched his head, clearly unsure. "It means you're not registered as staying in that cabin anymore. You'll need to check with guest services directly." Tessa stared at him, cold with confusion. "Are you saying we've been kicked out?" The steward didn't answer. He just nodded nervously and walked away. They made their way down to Deck 3, where the concierge desk was located. The line was long, but Tessa pushed her way through. She slapped her card down on the counter. "Hi, my name is Tessa Monroe. This card doesn't work. My room's locked. What is going on?" The concierge, a neatly dressed woman named Lily, calmly took the card and typed into her system. After a few clicks, she looked up, surprised but still professional. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Monroe. I'm showing a notice here. Your cabin access and excursion privileges were canceled this morning." Tessa blinked. "What?" "According to this, the reservation holder requested room changes and reassignment. It appears the name associated with payment was listed as Mrs. Helen Monroe." Tessa's face lost all color. Blake stepped in, whispering harshly, "There must be some mistake. I made the reservation. We paid for. The concierge gently turned the screen to face them. Every charge. Every room. Every tour package. All linked to one name, Helen Monroe. Your mother? Tessa spat. Blake said nothing. Meanwhile, just 2 decks above, Helen was enjoying breakfast by the water. She sat on a private balcony table reserved for gold-tier guests. A soft breeze lifted her scarf as she sipped her tea and read the ship's daily newsletter. The server approached with a warm smile. Mrs. Monroe, your massage is booked for 10:30 and your island tour is confirmed at noon. Thank you, dear, she said kindly. The moment felt surreal. She hadn't been treated with such respect in years. From her seat, she saw Blake and Tessa rushing past the glass doors below, still in wrinkled clothing, clearly in distress. She didn't wave. She didn't smirk. She just took another bite of her warm croissant and looked out at the sea. Back downstairs, the panic was spreading. Tessa stormed out of the concierge area and began shouting at Blake. You said we were paying. You said it was our trip. I didn't know she did this. I had no idea. You didn't know your own mother upgraded every room and paid for the whole damn cruise. What does that make us look like? People nearby had started whispering. Blake buried his face in his hands. He was humiliated. Tessa had insisted on inviting Helen just to get it over with and be done with her. Now the entire ship knew they had been cut off, on a trip they didn't even pay for. Worse, the excursions Tessa had bragged about on Instagram canceled. The spa package she was supposed to enjoy that morning reassigned. Even the specialty restaurant dinner she booked days ago, rebooked under a different name. Helen, meanwhile, had already spoken to Captain Rowan Kent the night before. After reviewing the paperwork and listening to her quiet voice, he was moved. You're not asking for revenge, are you? He'd asked. No, Helen had replied calmly. Just peace. So he arranged everything as requested quietly. No announcements. No drama. Just a polite reshuffling of accounts and access, just as a VIP guest is entitled to. Back on deck 3, Tessa wasn't letting it go. She can't just do this, she raged. She's not in charge. She's not the head of this family. She's just some lonely old woman clinging to. She froze. Standing 10 feet behind her was Helen. Still. Silent. Dignified. Tessa stared at her. Blake turned around slowly, his face already filled with shame. Helen didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just looked at them with tired, glassy eyes. And then she said something neither of them would ever forget. You brought me on this cruise to get rid of me. So I made sure I wouldn't have to come back with you. Then she turned, nodded to the concierge, and walked away. Tessa didn't follow. Blake didn't speak. They just stood there, stunned, and finally beginning to understand who really held everything together all these years. Later that afternoon, Helen attended her massage, then joined a private wine tasting with 3 other guests from the gold-tier list. One woman asked her, Are you traveling with family? Helen paused, then said softly, I was. But now, I'm just enjoying the ocean. She smiled, not out of triumph, but relief. The luxury cruise ship glided smoothly through turquoise waters under a perfect sky. Guests were laughing on the sun deck, sipping cocktails, dipping their feet into hot tubs, and posing for selfies at the railing. But on deck 4, the tension in one corner of the ship was thick enough to slice with a knife. Tessa Monroe stood in front of the onboard boutique shop, arms folded tightly across her chest, sunglasses shielding her furious eyes. Blake stood beside her awkwardly, trying to look normal but failing miserably. They were both still dressed in wrinkled, travel-stained clothes because their bags had been locked in their former suite. Now they were waiting for a staff member to deliver them their luggage, at the public help desk, like ordinary guests. Tessa couldn't believe it. This trip, her trip, was turning into a disaster. And to make it worse, people were talking. She could feel it. The side glances. The quiet giggles. The couple at the smoothie bar had been whispering and then looked straight at her before turning away. She knew what they were thinking. That's the woman whose mother-in-law canceled her room. Her blood boiled. She's doing this to humiliate me, Tessa snapped under her breath. She's trying to embarrass me in front of the whole ship. Blake rubbed his temples. She's not trying to humiliate you, Tessa. She just finally snapped. Can you blame her? Tessa turned to him, shocked. Wait, are you taking her side now? Blake sighed. No, I'm not taking sides. I just think we pushed her too far. Tessa hissed. You barely speak to her, and I have bent over backwards trying to include her in this family. Blake didn't respond, because deep down he knew it wasn't true. Earlier that morning, after their cabin lockout and confrontation with Helen, Blake had tried to find a solution. He went to the concierge and asked if they could be reassigned to a new room, even if it wasn't upgraded. The concierge, politely, had said, "I'm afraid all standard-level cabins are fully booked for the next 5 days." That meant they had two choices: buy new rooms at full-price luxury tier, which they couldn't afford; stay in temporary shared guest quarters, used by late-boarded passengers or emergency reassignments. No windows, no perks, and no privacy. They ended up in option 2. And Tessa was furious. "This was supposed to be my vacation." "A reset," she muttered. "A reset," Blake repeated. "Tessa, you didn't even want her to come." She turned to him. "Of course not. Every time she's around, I feel like I'm being judged. You don't say it, but I know what you think. That I'm not as patient, not as gentle as her." Blake's mouth opened slightly, but he didn't argue. Tessa clenched her fists. "Fine. She wants a power play? She wants everyone to know she's the hero? Let her have her little moment. I'll play nice for now." Around lunchtime, they finally received their luggage. It arrived in 2 scuffed suitcases, the tags taped hastily over with temp room, deck 2 holding. Tessa didn't want to touch the bags. The tape felt like a label. "You don't belong here." After changing into a crisp sundress and oversized hat, she painted on a fake smile and walked up to deck 6 with Blake trailing behind. "I'm going to find her," she said. "Why?" "To clear the air," she said without meaning it. "To fix things." But really? Tessa had a different plan. She was going to try to flip the story. They found Helen on the observation deck near the art gallery. She was sitting on a white lounger, book in hand, enjoying the sea view with a tall glass of peach iced tea by her side. Blake hesitated, but Tessa strutted over confidently. "Well, there you are," she said, smiling too widely. "We've been looking all over for you." Helen closed her book calmly. "Oh, I figured you'd be busy." Tessa let out a small laugh. "Well, we were just wondering what exactly happened this morning. It's all very confusing. Isn't that right, Blake?" Blake just nodded slowly. Helen said nothing. She waited. Tessa continued. "See, we're a little surprised to find out you paid for everything. You should have said something, Helen. We would have thanked you properly. Right, Blake?" Again, Blake nodded, but with guilt in his eyes. "But you see," Tessa added sweetly, "when people don't know what's going on, things can look bad. There are rumors going around the ship." Helen looked up. "Rumors?" "Just whispers," Tessa said. "People saying you canceled our tickets. That you had us thrown out of our room." "I didn't have you thrown out," Helen replied calmly. "I simply reclaimed what I paid for. That room was under my name. I removed the access." Tessa's smile faded a little. "Well, yes. But if people hear that, it makes it sound like you did it to hurt us. We're family, Helen. We don't punish each other." Helen closed her book fully now. Her voice remained gentle. "Tessa, for years, you've made me feel small. You've spoken about me like I'm a burden. And yesterday, you said it out loud. This would be my last trip with you. All I did was agree with you." Blake swallowed. Tessa's face darkened. "Look, I get it. You were offended. But this doesn't make you look noble, Helen. It makes you look vindictive." Helen blinked. "Does it? You've humiliated us in front of strangers." "No," Helen replied, standing up now. "I never once mentioned you to a soul on this ship. If anyone's embarrassed, it's because you made yourself loud." Then she added, "But since you're worried about appearances, don't worry. I've already arranged for your names to be quietly removed from the activity lists. No announcements. No flags. You'll have a peaceful trip." And with that, she picked up her book and walked away. Tessa stood there, stunned. She hadn't expected that. Blake exhaled. "Maybe we should just let it go." "Let it go," she snapped. "She made a fool of us." "She didn't make a fool of us, Tessa. We did that." Tessa narrowed her eyes. "Not me. I'm not done yet." Later that night, Tessa attended a group mixer for upper-tier guests, without an invitation. She told the staff she was temporarily locked out, and smiled sweetly until they let her in. She walked around, dropping comments like, "Oh yes, I'm married to Blake Monroe. His mother is Helen Monroe. You've probably seen her. She's going through some things emotionally. A little unpredictable lately." And then she said something much worse. She leaned toward a couple from Florida and whispered, "She's nice, but you know how the elderly can get. Lonely. Attention-seeking. It's just sad." She didn't know the couple were Helen's dinner companions from the night before. They told Helen everything. The next morning, Helen approached the same concierge she'd met with on the first night. "I'd like to reserve 2 tickets to the private chef's table dinner," she said. "For yourself, then?" "No, I'll be dining alone," she said with a smile. "The other ticket? Please assign it to a couple I met at last night's trivia game. They've never experienced anything like that before." The concierge smiled. "Of course, ma'am." Helen turned to leave, then paused. "Oh," she added, "and please remove Mrs. Tessa Monroe from the ship newsletter's interview segment. She told me she'd rather not be featured anymore." It wasn't true, but it would be enough. By the 4th day of the cruise, word had quietly spread among the more observant passengers. Something had happened between that elegant older woman, Helen Monroe, and the sharp-tongued woman often seen dragging around a visibly uncomfortable husband. No one said anything directly, but glances, gestures, and whispers filled in the blanks. But Helen wasn't bothered. For the first time in years, she wasn't walking on eggshells. No forced smiles. No biting her tongue at dinner. No watching her every move to avoid Tessa's disapproval. She finally felt like herself. That morning, Helen woke up early to join a guided painting session on the open deck. She wore a long blue scarf over a flowy white blouse, and her hair, silver but softly curled, danced in the sea breeze. With a brush in one hand and a palette in the other, she painted quietly beside the other guests, strangers at first. One of them, a warm woman named Julie, asked, "Is this your first cruise?" Helen smiled. "First one without my late husband." Julie gently nodded. "I'm here with my 2 kids and my husband. We do this every year. We lost my dad recently, so this year feels quieter." Helen and Julie painted side by side for over an hour, gradually opening up about life, grief, motherhood, and what it means to feel unseen, especially by the ones you love most. By the end of the class, Julie reached out and said, "Helen, we're having lunch together on Deck 9 in the garden lounge. Join us. Please." Helen paused, surprised. "You don't have to eat alone again," Julie added softly. Meanwhile, in the lower-level breakfast buffet, Tessa was pushing her scrambled eggs around on a paper plate. Their temporary guest quarters came with none of the perks she was used to. No table service, no fruit bar, and definitely no cappuccinos with almond milk. Blake sat across from her, quietly chewing toast. "Why are you so quiet?" Tessa snapped. He looked up, startled. I don't know what else to say, Tess." "Oh, I can think of a few things. Like why your mother is suddenly best friends with half the ship." Blake sighed. "She's being kind. Maybe people like her." Tessa shot him a glare. "No. People feel sorry for her. She's playing the victim." Blake didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. Helen hadn't said a word about what happened. Not to the crew. Not to other guests. Not to anyone. She wasn't playing the victim. She was simply living better without them. And that somehow made Tessa feel even more threatened. Later that afternoon, as Blake went to the gym to clear his head, Tessa wandered upstairs. Curious about the new friends Helen was suddenly dining with. She climbed up to the garden lounge and peeked inside from behind a potted plant. Her jaw dropped. Helen was sitting at a long table beside Julie, her husband Mark, and their 2 teenage children. They were laughing, as Helen shared a story, gesturing with her hands. The waiter brought her a mango tart. One of the children offered her a fork. Tessa's eyes narrowed. "What is she doing?" she muttered. "Clinging to another family now?" But the truth was obvious to anyone watching. They had invited her. And Helen didn't look desperate. She looked content. Julie turned to her and asked, "Helen, do you want to join us for the island excursion tomorrow? We're renting a private jeep to tour the volcano trails. I can add another seat." "Oh, I wouldn't want to intrude." "You're not," Mark interrupted with a warm grin. "You're family now." Helen's chest tightened. Family. The word felt foreign and familiar at the same time. The way they said it, it didn't come with judgment. It didn't feel conditional. They liked her for her. She nodded slowly. "I'd love to." Tessa didn't know what to do with what she'd seen. On one hand, she told herself she didn't care. On the other, something inside her twisted with discomfort. Blake came back to their temporary room to find her pacing. "She's eating with another family." He blinked. "What?" "Upstairs. Laughing, telling stories. Like she belongs to them." Blake sat on the edge of the bunk bed. "Good. She deserves to be happy." Tessa scoffed. "Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to make us look like we threw her away." Blake looked up at her, finally angry. We did throw her away. That stopped her cold. She paid for everything. She's done nothing but support us. Helped us with daycare, gave you birthday money when we couldn't afford it. And you treated her like she was invisible. I didn't say anything then, and I regret that. Tessa crossed her arms. So now I'm the villain? Blake stood. I don't know what you are, Tessa. But I'm not proud of how we treated her. He walked out, leaving Tessa stunned. That evening, as the ship pulled into a glowing coastal port, Helen stepped out on her private balcony and looked down at the water. A small knock came at her door. She opened it, expecting room service, but instead found Julie and Mark holding a small dessert box with a ribbon. We told the bakery it was for someone classy and kind, Julie smiled. Helen laughed softly. Oh, you shouldn't have. Inside was a strawberry tart, freshly glazed. Julie added, and by the way, we added you to the Jeep booking tomorrow. It's all set. Helen placed a gentle hand over her heart. Thank you. Really? Mark said. It's not just a ride. It's an invitation. Helen smiled. Then I accept. Meanwhile, Tessa sat in silence back in the temporary quarters. She opened her phone and tried to scroll Instagram, but the Wi-Fi wasn't available in their cabin tier. She stared at a black loading screen, reflecting the emptiness she now felt. Blake returned late. He didn't speak. And for the first time since the cruise began, Tessa felt truly left out. Not excluded by design, but left behind by her own choices.